So your lesson plan objectives. So what do you want your participants to learn? What do you want them to know? What do you want them to do? And what do you want them to be? So this is where, if you look through the module for this course, you can go to the specific curriculum and find the curricular points. So what level of students are you teaching? So let's, for instance, you're teaching a grade 3 group. You would go to level 3 of the Australian curriculum, and depending on the subject area, so that could be English. So you would go to Year 3 or Level 3 of the English curriculum, and then that can guide exactly what you think, what the curriculum says is appropriate for that group. And same for all the other subjects in the curriculum. So that's going to guide your lesson plan objectives. And as per the modules, it's important if you are using objectives to use different verbs, and Bloom's taxonomy can be really good for that. So it might be to apply a certain learning area. It could be to synthesize. It could be to, these are the type of verbs looking for: analyze and apply and synthesize, evaluate, identify. These are the type of objective verbs, and then you can link that to the curricular points as well. So before you do any sort of lesson planning, it's important to conduct a contextual analysis. So that's the sum of all factors that will affect what is delivered, how it is delivered, and what the students or participants will learn throughout the session. So some contextual variations will enhance teaching, and some will inhibit it. So it's really important to go to the area as early and as much as possible before you actually plan to teach there. Sometimes it's really important because you don't know what the seating arrangements will be, even the type of seats. I've had this occur before. Sometimes it's good to know that the IT system is working. Sometimes it's really good to know how much space you've got. Is there many distractions? Is there noise outside? All these things will influence how your plan will actually unfold. So some components of a textual analysis, I hinted at a few then, the teacher. So what do you need to know and what do you need to do to learn that? So if you're not familiar with a certain content that you're supposed to teach, well then that's your preparation. So we're very well blessed in our modern society that we have access to a range of online resources through Google, through YouTube, and et cetera, Twitter is actually a really good one these days. Lots of people sharing different resources professionally. Number 2, the students. As I said, how many? What are their differing needs? And it doesn't need to be what their learning style is. It could also be their backgrounds, their interests, and that's their differing needs, their developmental stage, and motivation, of course. Number 3, content. What do the participants need to know? And that's where you're going to go with the curriculum. Exit levels and standards. The order and sequencing of activities, so that you wouldn't start off with a really challenging activity and get easier. In most cases, you want to build from maybe an introductory activity and progress to something more challenging through your sessions and throughout a unit. How long to spend on each task, what type of assessment. So how are you going to determine that learning has been, that has occurred in your classes, learning goals. And number 4, their resources. How many lessons or sessions are available? How many minutes? Oh, sorry, we've got, just noticed another spelling there. Sorry, how much? Sorry about that. We'll cross that out. How much content is to be learnt and what facilities and equipment are available? So risk management. You need to also, in any activity, in any classroom, it's a little bit easier in the primary setting if you're in the same classroom day after day after day. But sometimes you might be on camps, and as a young teacher learning, a lot of the schools get you involved in the camp process. So you need to complete a risk analysis, visit activity environments, consider the safety of all activities. sometimes you can take pictures, and sometimes leaders of the school like to see a bit of maybe an emergency plan or strategies to minimize risk so that they feel at ease, depending on the school and the people there, and the level of risk and challenge in the activities. So we've talked about a little bit about referring to the curriculum and the resources, but also that's really important, and you really want to inspire the students. And something that I'm really passionate about is trying to think up a ranges of ideas that are going to engage the students. You want to inspire them with their learning. So you want it imaginative, you want variety, you want it interesting, and as I've already said a few times, you want to build the learning experiences to make it more and more challenging and difficult for the students, so that they are continually pushing themselves and reaching new levels. And you also want to ensure that it flows logically. I'll just skip that one there. So I'm going to provide a couple of examples with a phys ed focus, and just show you, obviously this is very specific to PE, but I'm going to highlight some of the concepts that are very uniform across the board. So sometimes it's good to use diagrams of how your activities are going to unfold. You want to keep it neat. As I said, you want to refer to it and have a quick glance along the way, because you're managing a whole big group of students of diverse abilities and interests. You want a reusable resource for later on, and that's going to be it's going to be great, especially if you've taught it before, because sometimes teaching is the best way to learn a certain content area. So here's an example PE plan, and a template. So you have the objectives here. You have an overall aim. So the objectives and aim will come from the curriculum. What's at the specific level? You got the level here. You can plan for all this level, the class size, types of equipment, venue, subject, and you see what lesson number it is. So on the overall unit plan. And you've also got so an intro or warm up. So in your general classroom, you would just have an intro. Rather than a skill, you would introduce a concept. So you might have an introductory, you're going to have a core lesson activity, generally, a minimum of one. And then sometimes, depending on, it could be a conclusive time down here. This has small group practice, but I'm going to show you an example of a couple of lesson plans in relation to physical education. So this is a previous student from RMIT University in Melbourne, and you can see here how clearly it's set up. And I'm just going to focus on some of the non-physical education areas as well. So obviously this is for prep. So this is, or your transition in the Northern Territory, or is starting to become known as foundation. So the level just prior to year one, grade one in your primary schools. And you can see all the equipment considerations here. You have an overall aim here. Okay, so in the curriculum, there will be a focus on locomotor skills. So this one is looking at the vertical jump, and you have different verbs here about the vertical jump. So you can see here demonstrate, you have display, you also have demonstrate. But as I said before, you could implement different verbs such as apply, evaluate, synthesize, identify. They're the type of verbs you can use. And then you also have some cues along the way. So each activity involves equipment. Probably not as necessary to have your diagrams in your general other subject areas, but you can also see here the intro. So outline the expectations and rules. That's a really good one. I'm sorry if I'm getting used to this Blackboard Collaborate here. Safety issues are really important, and teaching cues are really good as well. So you got some teaching points over here. So watch where you're going, bend your knees when you're landing. So just a few key points that the students will be able to take in and implement at a later date. So obviously the lesson plan template is different for this course, but just a few considerations from a previous university and unique subject area, just looking at the key areas. Here's another one. You can see very similar. So this one's at grade 1 and 2. It's now AusVals with the Australian curriculum. So this was from a couple of years ago. Equipment once again. And you can just see they've got a time limit, specified times. They have, you can see, no equipment was required there, but you can see there's some expectations and outline there and those type of things. So you get the picture there. There's a bit of an idea. So you probably noticed in the first lesson plan there were some teaching cues and points to positively reinforce the learning outcomes that the students can take away, and so they can remember those if they had to apply that knowledge later on. You can constantly reinforce those teaching cues and also provide feedback that they are demonstrating the learning process that you've intended along the way. And teaching cues are not encouragement, and so that's reinforcing the teaching points. Another strategy that you can have in your lesson is the appropriate questioning. So that could be, it could be pre-assessment of the learning group, assess what learning has taken place, so have a discussion and question the students. It could be to develop students' interest, so what do they know about a certain content area, and clarify any misconceptions within the class. So you could bring up, question the students about a certain idea, and clarify that they're on the right or wrong track from that idea. And as I was leading to before, Bloom's taxonomy. So knowledge, these are the different layers or levels of higher order thinking, and this is how you could structure your question. So once again, I have taught phys ed before, so I'm using a phys ed background, but this can be applied across the board. So for instance, your first level of question could be knowledge. It could be how many players or how many people are in this setting, how many subject areas are in this curricular document, whatever it may be. So that's your first one. That's a really basic level of questioning, and most students will be able to answer the knowledge type. Okay. The next one's comprehension, which is explaining the aim of something. So first of all, how many players are in this court, and all right, so can you explain the aim of why they're positioned the way they are? Application. For instance, if you're a defender, what would you do if? Or if you're a scientist and this built out, what would you do if? So it's applying that knowledge. Analysis. Why did the Bunsen burner land on its head instead of the feet? Or why did the sports person land on his knee rather than his feet? Or whatever it may be. You're analysing a situation. That's the next level of questioning. And the great tongue tie, synthesis. How has physical activity made a difference in your life? So maybe applying knowledge and how that can relate to life situations. And the last one there, evaluation. Explain how effective the fitness program was, and how valuable a certain idea was, and you're evaluating the content. So you can use that structure to really allow students to understand it. So a student might be able to answer the knowledge question, but they might have difficulty maybe with the application or analysis. But by asking that question, the students could hear another person in the classroom answer that question, and so on. So you're really engaging different layers and levels of thinking and allowing students to learn at the different levels. So something to really take away is to be realistic. Practice timing your instruction, so not speaking for too long. Considering the transition time and flow between activities. It's better to have too much planned than not enough, because that means you can always adapt and go with the flow. Plan for flexibility, so you don't want it too challenging or too basic. You want it, and that's where pre-assessment can be useful to find out where the students are at. And also consider any potential disruptions. You might have students in your class that require going to a music class or a religious, or a meeting with a year level coordinator or a principal, or they have to leave, whatever it may be. Shortened sessions potentially for assemblies, so they're things to consider. And also, as you go along, you may have different approaches to teaching, and some examples there could be direct teaching. So you might have, you might like to think of the students as a bit of a container, and you want to fill students with that type of information in direct teaching. And this is a bit of an old school type way to teach, and it's becoming a lot more student-centered these days. So game sense is a strong one, where a lot of teachers these days are using different types of games with teaching and learning embedded within the games, and questioning the students' learning processes as part of their games and activities. That's another approach. As I mentioned at the very start of this recording, cooperative learning and having groups set up for different roles. As I said, with the text type, you could have an analyzer, an illustrator, you could have a presenter, whatever it may be. Maybe in a PE class, you could have an umpire, you could have someone giving feedback, those type of. So having those set roles, and it can be guided discovery, where you know the solution to an activity, and you're guiding step by step the students through that. You can have a problem-solving type approach, where there's multiple solutions to a problem, and you get the students to experience the activity and come up with the different approaches that they had to the problem. Peer tutoring as well, and so you might have students that are very proficient in a certain area, and they can coach and provide feedback to students not so proficient. So there's some ideas in that regard. You also need a managerial plan, which is important. We've talked about safety rules, but also having routines as well that students are used to. And of course, the types of learning activities. So really be creative. You can have critical thinking tasks, which is really big in health education. So it could be analysing TV ads in health education and seeing what the underlying messages are. Another good one for health education, which is for critical thinking, could be putting students in potentially threatening situations, thinking about threatening situations and how they'll deal with it, or whatever, depending on the year level, of course, and the curriculum. Checking for understanding, obviously different homework, could be self-analysis, so it could be self-feedback, video recordings, you get the picture. So thinking about all those ranges of activities. Something I want to leave you with for this recording. So planning is not a guarantee that things won't go wrong, but it provides that document to help you cope when things do go wrong. And in teaching, with the weather and behavioural problems and interruptions, things do go wrong, and just provides you with that guarantee. So planning is not a guarantee that things won't go wrong, but it helps you cope when things do go wrong, and they definitely will. Okay, thanks a lot.